And we're live with my special guest, Tom Condon, who is going to tell us about a special course that he is running. And there will be, and I'll try to remember to post the link down below in the description. Over to Tom.
Thanks for having me. I'm doing a course online for the Shift Network. It's called the Enneagram of Freedom. And it includes material and applications and methods and techniques drawn from NLP and Ericksonian hypnosis and various other disciplines that are in my background. And the central point of the course will be focusing on the Enneagram as a context and a way to promote change in yourself, or if you're a coach or a counselor or a practitioner or somebody who works with other people, then it will also help with that. It'll be a lot of kind of methods and techniques, as well as approaching each Enneagram style in a dynamic way, so that rather than thinking of it as something you are, you sort of approach it as something that you do. And in the doing of it, it has a certain expression and purpose, and yet people will find that they get caught sometimes in the low side of their personality patterns and their Enneagram style. And the freedom part of it has to do with moving from the low side to the high side, to finding and accessing and more often your natural talents and abilities and resources, and then also wearing your Enneagram style, your personality style, much more lightly. And within that, also being able to open up to realities that are beyond your personal self in a spiritual sense. And so the main emphasis within this will be sort of dynamic, and with an emphasis on growing and changing, rather than just knowing about your Enneagram style and leaving it at that, or accepting it as some sort of life sentence or some sort of number that's stamped on your forehead. This will be more of an approach that says, well, when you're caught in the low side of your Enneagram style, or you're reacting without choice, that there's a kind of unconscious logic to it, and it's a kind of defense. And within that defense, there are memories sometimes, or kind of unconscious assumptions, and people can begin to get in touch with those and free themselves up and free themselves to move towards the high side. Right. So that's pretty much it. We'll have an introductory evening. There is actually an interview that I've done with them already, and then there'll be 10 sessions to the course, and there'll be an introductory evening that puts a frame around all of this, what we're going to do, and then we'll have 9 more sessions, and that'll be for the 9 more Enneagram styles.
Right. I believe that this first event is free of charge.
Yeah, and actually the course, if you play your cards right, the course is free of charge as well. What they do is they record each session, and then they post it for 48 hours, I think. And so if somebody is really kind of attentive, they can listen to the course for free. It doesn't include other things that are considered bonuses and other elements to the course that are included in the package. So for some people, it's worth it to buy the course, and then if other people are watching their budget, they can, with a little bit of persistence, they can hear it for free.
Yeah, that could be a good thing, if Jonathan and I could watch that, and then we could maybe get back to you on the things that we've seen. And also I was thinking there, it's if a type that really wants advice, I was going to ask about the 4, but I'm thinking the 6. So if we give an example of the 6, the sort of things, the way you can help a 6, the way this course could help a 6 person, I think that would be good. It puts some meat on the bones, of course.
Well, it'd probably help a 6 person the way it would help somebody else with another Enneagram style, in the sense that we would be exploring methods and techniques and patterns and things that come from NLP, for example, that help you begin to get in touch with and to realize how you are creating your own inner reality within the purview of your Enneagram style, and also what the logic of that might be, what the internal defensiveness about it is, what you're trying to achieve. You know, in NLP, they have that sort of reframing paradigm where people are attached to an old behavior or attached to a problem or attached to an old method of defense. And in that attachment, they think they're doing something, and what they're doing is what used to work.
Right. So I think Enneagram audience is not used to thinking of NLP. And I'm thinking of one particular person who's a 6 who's on my channel, Hannah.
Sure.
And I was thinking if you could give us an example of the sort of thing that a 6 might worry about, and how that thing can be reframed. That will tell the audience, oh, this is what reframing means. And it's also something for 6s.
6s scare themselves. And they scare themselves in order to stay safe. And it's sort of a paradoxical defense, because it's you actually don't feel safer, but you think you're trying to be safe by anticipating negative things that can happen. Usually this has a correlation in the person's background. It's something that they learned. They didn't entirely learn their Enneagram style, but they learned the defensiveness of it. Yeah. And grew up maybe in unstable circumstances, or where there was hostility or aggression in the air or something like that, or kind of an existential uncertainty. And then they learn how to start to do this thing to themselves that used to happen to them. In other words, they used to get scared routinely in their environment. So they start to scare themselves in order to anticipate what can go wrong, in order to prepare for it, in order to be safe. And then it's 20, 30, 40 years later, and the 6 starts to realize, oh, I'm doing this to myself now, sort of before anyone can. And it had a protective benefit at one time. It was the best choice possible, as they say in NLP. It was perfect for the circumstances in which it was developed. But then as a 6 starts to begin to explore, what they find is that they're trying to protect themselves by being weak, or they're trying to protect themselves by being frightened. And sometimes then this leads to kind of a search for other ways to protect themselves, and more of a sense of security within themselves in the first place, and claiming their power and authority rather than kind of giving it away to others, or projecting it onto parents, or projecting it onto bosses, or projecting it onto Donald Trump, or entities outside themselves, institutions outside themselves. And then they start to recognize their strengths as well. And in NLP, you can kind of gather somebody's strengths and kind of apply them to a problem, or a way in which they're limiting themselves, and affect and modify the problem by bringing the strengths to the forefront. Also, 6s will sometimes start to realize there's a process to how I scare myself. There's certain sensory qualities that are consistent. For example, they'll scare themselves with big pictures in their mind's eye, not little pictures. The pictures aren't snapshots, they're movies with lots of detail and lots of movement within them. They're not dull pastel colored, they're usually brightly colored. And when a 6 is in their pattern, and a 6 is in their trance, they can be doing things like that with some consistency.
Could you give us an example of the kind of thing they worry about? How elaborate this sort of like a sort of negative fantasy, sort of nightmare scenario, sort of like day nightmaring?
Well, a person could walk into a new situation, a pristine situation. They could be upset about something else that's happened before, and then they start to look around in the situation and they react to the situation. I'm a 6. I can give you an example. One time I was having a really frustrating day in my office, and the machines weren't working properly, and I got more and more agitated. So I thought, well, I'll go to the gym and kind of work out and, you know, kind of get rid of this energy. So I go to the gym and I'm working out, and there's a guy in the gym who I look up at some point from what I'm doing, and the guy is looking at me and he's going like this. And I, you know, kind of noted it, but then I ignored it. And then I went and I did something else. And a little while later, I look up and the guy's looking over in my direction like this. And so I start thinking, okay, you know, these kinds of things happen at the gym. You know, men have a lot to prove. They go around, they're angry, they've got energy. They go around and, you know, have these little challenges with each other. Well, this went on a few more times until I met him up at the drinking fountain. And I'm counterphobic, so I sort of go towards something that I might be afraid of. And so in this case, the guy stood up from taking a drink of water, and I looked at him and said, "Hi, how you doing?" And the guy looked at me and he said, "Fine, how are you doing?" And what I realized was that the man couldn't see, and he wasn't wearing his glasses. So I projected my frustrated, angry mood onto his expression, and it was totally wrong.
Right.
But it was an attempt to, you know, kind of anticipate and an attempt to kind of, you know, assess danger, except it was totally wrong.
Right. So is this an example of learning to teach, say, sixes to reframe a situation and say, okay, what else could it be? What else could be the cause of this?
Reality checking. Yeah. Reality checking works very well with that style. It's not as central with other styles.
I've heard from John Grinder about, I think he said the best thing from original, I think he called it old classic code, NLP. I think his favorite pattern was 6-step reframe. Is that something?
With 6?
No, he just called it a 6-step reframe.
Oh, a 6-step reframe.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you think that's a good technique and can be used?
Well, there's different levels to it, but the 6-step reframe basically says, the question I sometimes ask clients when I work with them is, you've got this problem. What would be 3 good reasons to keep the problem? And they might say at first, well, there's no good reasons, but when they start to think about it, then they start to realize what the secondary gains are. In other words, well, in a weird way, I feel like I'm protecting myself. Somehow this is related to a role I had to play in my family, that kind of thing. And so the person will come out with kind of unconscious reasons that sort of drive a problem. And then in 6-step reframing, what you're after is creating a bunch of new ways to fulfill the old needs, to protect yourself in new and better ways. And that's one level to it. Another level to it, though, is also to kind of go underneath it. It's sort of like in what they call core transformation, that technique created by Connie Ray Andreas and Tamara Andreas. And in that, what you're doing with the, let's say a person's just saying, well, I'm trying to protect myself. The practitioner would ask, well, what's a deeper and more important need that fulfills? And then a person will come up with something, and then they'll ask, well, whatever the person comes up with, the practitioner will ask, well, what's a deeper and more important need that fulfills? And you kind of just keep going deeper and deeper until you get down to some sort of what they call a core state, but it's often a core state of well-being or a sense of being that is independent of your defenses.
Right. I was thinking we could do a good hangout in future, a short hangout with Hannah, who's an Enneagram type 6, reframing things. And one of the things I think she's talked about publicly is body image. And I know you may have come across this with other 6s where they have issues with body image. What sort of techniques?
Well, I don't know what that means in particular with her, but right. One of the things that can go with scaring yourself and seeing large images in your mind's eye is that you feel small.
Right.
because the powerful force that you're protecting yourself against is larger than you. When was the last time you felt really small that way? Well, usually it goes back to childhood. And so there's a sort of distortion of the picture of the self, and your age regressed in hypnotic terms. And also you send yourself back in time to some early situation where you were frightened and you don't have any more strengths or talents or resources or skills than you did, because you're back inside the picture believing that you're 7 years old and that you're very small.
Well, one of the things that you should realize about NLP is that to look at the people who NLP modeled, the people that NLP modeled were very respectable people, like, say, Milton Erickson. You know, try to discredit him. He had very good hypnotic techniques that, I mean, most hypnotists know about NLP. And that's fair to say, isn't it, Tom?
Well, I think, you know, we've talked about this before, but I think NLP, there's two versions of it. One of them is kind of glib and shallow and takes advantage of people. And there's another one that is a deep bench of tools and techniques and distinctions and understandings of behavior that are really useful, especially applied to something like the Enneagram, which when I first came across the Enneagram, nothing much was being applied to it in the way of helping people change. Yeah. So those deep distinctions, you know, and those methods that are culled from the study of a bunch of really successful therapists in the first place, and then have been expanded upon and developed and made more subtle and comprehensive, those really apply well to something like the Enneagram and working with Enneagram patterns and limitations that people might feel they have, and ways in which they want to outgrow old limits and go towards the high side of their style.
Yeah, I mean, I can see
that's what the course will be about.
I can see how learning Enneagram can be a big, big help to hypnotherapists to get to the core issues. So,
I think so. I find the merging of the Enneagram with methods from various disciplines is really, really powerful. And a lot of people I work with do too.
Yeah, and I remember in this book by Annie Linden, one of the things that there it is. One of the things she said that she used Enneagram as the organizing framework, and NLP was the specific techniques, because it was like when you diagnose someone's Enneagram type, it gives you an idea of the kinds of issues they may have, and then you can ask about that ballpark, and then once you get to those issues, then you've got these techniques, one of which we mentioned, reframe. And
it also gives you a map of their strengths.
Yes.
Lots of you have a central Enneagram style, and you have lots of other connections, and they all bring resources. So it's great that way too. Right.
I don't know anything else you'd like to say. I mean, we've talked about the 6. We don't want all the types. Useful.
Well, actually, my time is limited today.
Right.
But there's sort of custom approaches for each of the types, each of the styles, and NLP and these various distinctions are applied differently with different styles, as well as there are distinctions that help with all of them. So that's kind of been my work and the thing I know, and I'm going to try and communicate it as densely and thrillingly as I can within this, and make it useful to people who want to grow and change for themselves and apply the Enneagram to that end, or to people who do counseling and therapy or coaching, or are practitioners of NLP or whatever. It'll make sense to them too.
So what we can do is we'll just finish off by, if you sort of like give a suggestion of what this shadow work, I think that was the term used, what that means in this context.
Well, working with shadows just means that when you're caught in the pattern of your Enneagram style, you're usually over-identifying with one part of your experience and under-identifying with another. And shadows in particular would mean, within the context of the Enneagram, would mean, the different types of people who maybe push your buttons, that you have an automatic reaction to, types that you list that you don't like, or types that you admire, who have qualities and capacities and strengths that you would like to have. And the fact that you kind of notice it and admire it means that those are latent within you. So it's working with dark shadows and working with light shadows.
That is very interesting. I could mention something, but that would be bringing in another context, and I promise not to do that. So,
and I've got to go.
Yes. So thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
What I will do now is end the hangout. You can. So thank you again, and remember, folks, the link is down below, waiting to be clicked on. So
down below.
Now, folks, down below, down under.